my name is Gabby and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here then welcome to my channel, and today's video is going to be my September 2024 reading wrap-up. We have 3 manga volumes, 2 books, 2 audiobooks, 1 graphic novel, and then the usual manga chapters to talk about today. I will have the content warnings for everything that I can find linked down below in the description, along with links to some resources, and let's go ahead and get into it. First up, we have The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzi, which is the 3rd and final book of the Montague siblings trilogy, the first book being The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. And Gentleman's Guide follows our main character whose grand tour of Europe and quest for pleasure and vice is in danger. After this tour is over, he will be forced into taking over his family's estate and following all of the responsibilities that come with that. Therefore, he is determined to make the most out of this year-long tour with his sister and then also childhood best friend / crush. But his recklessness ends up turning this trip into a manhunt across Europe, and then Nobleman's Guide follows the 3rd and final and youngest sibling, Adrian. I feel like I have been reading this series for forever, and it feels a little bit weird and a little bit sad now that it's over. But this was a pretty solid finale, thankfully. I mean, it's pretty long, and I definitely did feel that length at times. And yet, I still feel like there could have been something more or some different choices made throughout this story, even though I do like the story that this book told. There were a couple of characters that I really wanted to see more of because I liked them and or missed them, and also it's the final book. This was the last chance. And I feel like I just didn't really get that in the way that I wanted to, especially with Percy, but otherwise I really liked Adrian in this book, and this book does have a huge focus on mental health. I found myself relating to Adrian in ways that I really appreciated. Like, I started annotating books this month, and I just started marking some quotes that I really loved, and this book was 1, the inspiration to start doing that, and 2, just has some of my favorite quotes of the month, and I am very grateful for them. I think about them a lot, and I ended up giving The Nobleman's Guide to Scandal and Shipwrecks by Mackenzi 4.25 out of 5 stars. Next up is Freedom is a Constant Struggle by Angela Y. Davis. And this is a collection of essays, interviews, and speeches by world-renowned activist and scholar Angela Y. Davis. And this is one that covers a lot of different things. I listened to this on audio and it was a very interesting and engaging listen, and that's mostly because Angela Y. Davis has a lot of interesting and engaging things to say. It covers topics such as state violence and oppression, prison abolition, black feminism, previous liberation struggles, anti-apartheid movements from South Africa to Palestine, and it highlights the importance of movement and building movements for human liberation, and it talks a lot about the intersectionality of these struggles and injustices, and just why, if you care about one, you should care about all of them, because they all intersect in one way or the other. Which I thought was interesting because I do find myself thinking a lot about the exceptions that a lot of people who would call themselves progressive seem to make and be actively making. It's a powerful one, and it's one of the more captivating nonfiction listens that I've had, and I've had some really good ones. Next up is Celestial Monsters by Aiden Thomas, which is the sequel and final book of the Sunbearer Trials duology. The Sunbearer Trials takes place in a world where at the beginning of each decade, the sun's power must be replenished so that the evil obsidian gods can stay at bay. 10 semi-dioses are chosen to compete in the Sunbearer Trials, where the loser is sacrificed so that their body may protect everyone for the next 10 years. Our main character is the trans son of the goddess of birds, and he's never really worried about the trials other than worrying about others in regards to the trials. However, that all changes when he gets chosen to compete against opponents who are better trained and more powerful than himself. The way that I read this as soon as it was available to me, like, I was so excited for this book because the Sunbearer Trials is just one of my favorite things that I've ever read. Same with Cemetery Boys by this author. And this book did not disappoint me, and I really needed this book to not disappoint me. I love these characters so much, and they all have so much chemistry with one another, making the relationships, whether that's friendship, romance, rivals, or even enemies, some of my favorites ever. Like, the banter is so good, and this series is just definitely on another level entirely for me when it comes to those things, and it's at least part of what makes this series an all-time favorite for me. And then I also really love the world and the writing style. Celestial Monsters is a book that has a lot of layers to it, and it really dives into the social hierarchy of the world and just the privilege that the Golds and the Jades have, and just how the history of the world has been altered and covered up, and you see the characters learn those things and form their own opinions opinions and how it impacts their actions throughout the story. So we get to explore the world a lot more in that sense, but we also do get to explore it physically as well. And there are some really incredible, interesting places in here that were so much fun to read and explore. And I was just fully along for the ride with this book, and I felt like I enjoyed every single turn that it took. That being said, there were some things that I noticed. They didn't necessarily dampen my reading experience, but I did notice them. For example, there was a plot twist that I think just needed one more chapter or one more big moment of build-up. And I also do think part of the ending wrapped up a little bit too quickly from an emotional standpoint for the characters, but the epilogue did make me feel like a little bit better about that. And I did leave that epilogue ultimately feeling very happy with what I had just read and with a new favorite book. So I ended up giving Celestial Monsters 5 out of 5 stars. Next up is Goodbye Eri by Tatsuki Fujimoto, and this is a manga one-shot that follows our main character who tries to record his dying mother's last moments on his phone. And when the movie he makes from this footage isn't well received, he attempts to unalive himself on the hospital roof, but before he can, he meets a strange girl who convinces him to make another movie. I feel like I have so many thoughts about this and also none at the same time. Like, there's a part of me that just has no idea what to do or say about this, but I also do have things to say. I really like the composition of the panels. I thought that Tatsuki Fujimoto did some really interesting and smart things when it comes to that, and I also really like the tone of the overall story for similar reasons. But I also do think that I expected to like this a lot more than I ultimately did. Like, I don't feel very connected to it or attached to it, and I do think that there is a level of emotion that you're supposed to meet for this, and I just didn't. I also thought the ending felt confusing, and I think it is supposed to, but I also do feel like it is supposed to be one of the smart things that this story does, and it did just kind of miss for me. I don't know, I do have respect for this. I would watch it if it got animated into like a movie or something, and maybe even like it a little bit more if it got the right studio. And I'll for sure read more one-shots by Tatsuki Fujimoto and eventually get back into reading Chainsaw Man one day, but it's also one that I don't really know how to rate. Like, I put a question mark in the journal spread that I made for it because I just can't. Next up, we have Jujutsu Kaisen Volume 12 by Gege Akutami, and this follows our main character who spends his days with the occult club and visiting his hospitalized grandfather. However, he soon gets exposed to the world of curses when he unknowingly encounters a cursed item and ends up swallowing it. This item ends up being the finger of the king of curses, and with these newfound powers that the finger gives him, he gets enrolled in the Tokyo Prefectural Jujutsu High School, where he begins his journey of becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer. And I said Volume 12, but what I really meant was like the last 3 to 4 chapters of Volume 12, because I started this volume months ago and just didn't finish it. But I do think reading this, combined with the fact that it's now over at the time of filming this, I think that I may be reading more of this series very soon. But like, I've also said that before, not only with this series, but also with other series, and I just haven't. So we'll see. I do think that these were some really great chapters, and I do think that I am more mentally and emotionally prepared to finish the Shibuya arc. I feel like I've had enough time just like away from the anime for things to like level out again. I know what to expect now, but I also could be very, very wrong about that. Next up is Volume 1 of Witch Hat Atelier by Kamome Shirahama, and this is set in a world where everyone takes magic for granted, and our main character wants to be a witch. It's her dream, but she just wasn't born with the gift for it. She's about to give up, but that all changes when she meets a traveling magician who is performing magic in a way that she's never seen before. And she quickly learns that what everybody else knows about magic may not be the entire truth, and her dream may also not be as far away from her as she originally thought. I usually have a good reading month when it comes to manga, but this month just does feel like a little bit extra special, and this is one of the reasons why. It went in a different direction than I thought it was going to go, and I did know very little about this before starting this volume, but I am already so invested in everything about it, and part of that is of course the characters, who all do have a lot of charm and maybe even a little bit of mystery to them, and another part is just the quality of the story itself and the ideas and the magic system. But the other part is the art and the world itself, because this is genuinely one of the most beautiful things that I've ever read. It's so pretty, and it gives me everything that I could want and more from a fantasy series from an art style perspective. But the world itself also does have so many cool magical places and things going on. Again, there's a lot of mystery to it as well that I feel like adds to the magic and the fantasy, and does so in a way that makes me so excited to explore it more. It has an incredible atmosphere for sure, and it also does feel like a mix of wholesome and charming and playful with like this darkness underneath. I could very easily see this becoming a huge favorite of mine this fall, because it also does give me the vibes of a Great Fall series, and it also kind of already has become a huge favorite of mine even just after one volume. It's at a 5-star right now. We'll see if that changes or not. I will be devastated if that changes, by the way, and it will give me trust issues in my reading life. Next up, we have Nayra and the Djinn by Iasmin, Omar, and this follows our main character who is dealing with a lot, including strict parents, bullying, and friendship demands that leave her feeling exhausted. She's considering transferring schools when a Djinn shows up and uses their powers and wisdom to help her navigate her life, but she could be the one who ends up paying the price for this Djinn's past. I said in my fall TBR video that I would be surprised if this book made it out of September unread, and I basically read it right after filming that video. Like, by the time that video went up, it was already done, and I do unfortunately have some mixed feelings about it because I love the art style and the colors that were used. There are some really amazing and cool panels in here, and I also really like the story, both the fantasy and the one surrounding our main character. And I also just really liked our main character and the journey that she went on from a character growth perspective. But the friendship struggle that she was facing in here was handled in a way that just felt kind of confusing at first, and I don't think it wrapped up nicely either. Like, I got it, I see what this book was trying to do, I just feel like it could have been executed better, and that's pretty much the case for the ending as a whole. It just felt too quick to me and also kind of messy and again confusing. But otherwise, there was a lot about this that I really did like, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. And next up, we have Miss Meteor by Tehlor Mejia and Anna Marie McLemore. And this follows our two main characters, Lita and Chiki, who are ex-best friends but end up teaming up together to help Lita win the Miss Meteor pageant that has never had a winner who looks like either one of them. This was my other audiobook this month, and I do also have some mixed feelings about this one. I really enjoyed the magical realism element of this. I saw some reviews prior to reading this that people just didn't know or weren't expecting or just were confused by this whole thing, and I think going into this book knowing that it has magical realism and that Lita is from space definitely helped. But I also do feel like this book made it clear enough within the first few paragraphs, and I also think that this book has some really pretty descriptions and quotes about Stardust. I also just really liked Lita, and I felt attached to her throughout the entire book. As for Chiki, I really liked her at first, and then we kind of faded into like a neutral territory that did rebound at the end. As for the relationships, their friendship was by far what I was interested in the most, and just seeing them rekindle. But there are also 2 romances, and Lita and her love interest did grow on me more and more as the book went on, and I ended up really liking them a lot, and also a lot faster than Chiki and her love interest. But that feeling does just kind of make sense with Chiki's character growth and journey in here. But I also would have liked to see more of her love interest earlier on in the book, and then also just more of their dynamic. I also really like seeing all 4 of them together and the friendships there. Chiki also has some really fun family dynamics, and Lita also has a really heartwarming one. I also really love this book's message of finding your power and your confidence, and I loved watching these characters take their power back from the discrimination and the bullying that they were facing. But I also do think that this book tried to be like a little bit too quirky at times, which I think added to the charm when it worked, but when it missed for me, it really did miss, and it missed, I think, more than it succeeded. Overall, I did really like where this story ended up. There are some really amazing and beautiful moments. I just didn't love it the entire way through. It did feel kind of long as well, but I do think that is just because I've been listening to shorter audiobooks, and I ended up giving Miss Meteor by Tehlor Mejia and Anna Marie McLemore 3 out of 5 stars. And finally, we do have the other manga series that I am caught up to and read chapters from over on the Shonen Jump and Manga Plus apps, including chapters 114 and 115 of Kaiju number 8, chapters 20 and 21 of RuriDragon, chapters 124 to 128 of Akane-banashi, chapters 162 to 166 of Blue Box, chapters 47 to 51 of Kagurabachi, and chapters 60 to 62 of You and I Are Polar Opposites. And I alluded to this earlier, but this was definitely a very good reading month for me manga-wise, so shout out to all of these, honestly. But out of the 6 of these, my favorite of the month was definitely You and I Are Polar Opposites, with Kaiju number 8, Kagurabachi, and Blue Box as the runner-ups. Okay, so that is all that I have for today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, and answer a question that'll be around here if you want to do that, and hopefully I will see you here next time. Bye!